Welcome to the Courage to Be podcast with Tanya Vasallo. Before we get into this episode, I want to share with you that I'm on a mission to close the gender gap in the podcasting world so that more and more women's voices are heard. If you feel that this is something you value too, then please rate, review, and share the podcast. And in exchange, and as my way to say thank you to you, I want to give you free access to my signature course called Manifesting Abundance, which typically sells for $997. All you have to do to gain access is leave me a review on Apple Podcasts, take a snapshot of it, and send it to help.thecouragetobe@gmail.com, and we'll get you set up with access to the course. Welcome back to the Courage to Be, where we have powerful conversations to transform your life and your business. And today we have Carrie Lingenfelter with us. Welcome, Carrie.
Hi, Tanya. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be a guest today and connect with you.
I know. I am looking forward to learning from you actually today because your background is early childhood interventionist, speech therapist. You're a mom of two. Tell us a little bit about what is it that you do, and then we'll take it from there and see what we can do for our children as moms.
Sure. I love connecting with other parents. I started Heart to Heart Parents podcast in order to reach more people. And I love connecting with moms and dads, change maker moms and dads, raising change maker little being people that are coming to us. And I love reaching and connecting with other parents and helping to inspire them to focus on the positive pieces of parenting and being grateful for the opportunities to learn and grow that we are experiencing as parents. Also, reflecting that into our children, helping them to learn and grow into the best versions of themselves. So it's been a really awesome journey, and I'm really excited to be on it.
How did you get here? I mean, obviously you're a mom, but did this start once you became a parent? Did it start before becoming a parent and you knew what you wanted to do for children and parents? Share a little bit of your journey with us, please.
Sure. So it's been an evolving process. So I was an elementary educator first, and then I was a speech therapist. And I actually started using some of my connecting with my heart as a speech therapist when I was working with early intervention children. Birth to 3 were the age groups that I was working with. And I had these evidence-based practices that I learned in graduate school and in my training. But I would go into a house and I would feel in my heart, this child really needs this certain piece of the puzzle in order to help them communicate in their life. This child is overwhelmed by this situation. Maybe mom or dad are really focused on everything being perfect in the house. And so the child didn't want to speak. And so I started using all these pieces. I was connecting with my heart, and I didn't realize this when I was doing it at first. So when I started to talk to people and mentors that have helped me connect with my heart, they were like, Carrie, you're using your intuition, you're connecting and you're helping these children. You're using these evidence-based practices, of course, but you're also using your heart to feel what this person needs. So it was an evolution. But as I became a parent, you get into your mind so often as a new parent, you're taking this little baby home. You don't know what to do with them at first. You're like, how did these doctors send me home with this baby? What am I supposed to do? I don't know how to do this. And so I got into my mind a lot, and I pulled out the parenting books, and I thought I had to live right by the book and do everything by the book. And finally, people were saying, Carrie, get out of your head, get back into your heart. You don't need this. Your kid needs you to connect with them. Your kid needs you to understand what he needs and to help him be the best version of himself. So the ball really started rolling as a parent when I started to connect heart to heart and throw the parenting books out the window for myself.
I love that because when we first come home, as parents with this baby, and they don't come with a manual, there are books out there that will explain different things, but I don't think a lot of people tell you so much of follow your intuition. Like, I think every parenting book should be followed up with try this. And if it doesn't work, just connect with your inside. I mean, I'm just remembering becoming a mom, and I am very follow the rules and follow the book
Yes.
and follow how
Yes.
it has to be done. And everything has to be very controlled and very left brain. And I wish that I would have had someone like you, Carrie, that could have
Thank
helped me,
you.
just connect with my intuition and
Yeah.
listen and see what other things were going on. Talk to me more about this. You mentioned having mentors that would talk to you about connecting with your heart, and then we'll go into intuition. But I want to focus on what kind of teachings were
Yeah.
they teaching you about
Yeah.
connecting with your heart, and what does that look like? Because this is not something that they teach us at schools.
Right. And it's not something that happens right away either, right? It's a process of learning how to connect with our hearts. And I'm still learning too, right? There's still pieces that I'm like, oh, that's a great tool that I just developed today. So for me, I grew up with this connecting with our hearts. My grandmother was from Argentina and she was raised in a holistic setting. So I grew up with people teaching me how to listen to my heart. I grew up listening to working on spirituality as a child. My mom is a huge proponent of that. She was one of the people that was there with me saying, well, maybe you don't need to have him on a sleep schedule. Maybe you need to just follow him, follow his cues. What do you hear feels right for you? So I'm really lucky I had my mom there. I had my 93-year-old grandma there who was teaching me all of these pieces and all of these tools that helped her when she was a special ed teacher. That's how she was an amazing teacher. So I grew up with those. And then I also had a really great intuitive development coach that I started to see when I was pregnant. And I had readings with her when I was pregnant with my first son, my first child. And she helped me to develop these pieces. And as I started to see, hey, this actually works. Like, he doesn't want to sleep away from me. He wants to sleep on me. He wants to sleep with me. He wants to be near me. Those are pieces that I heard. And I started to see, oh, he can't do dairy. I always had this feeling he can't do gluten. I started to see, wow, this really works and it's real. So then I started to want to seek out more. And I went back to my intuitive coach and she taught me Reiki. And Reiki was something that I was able to do for myself to calm my nerves as I would get into my mind. I would use this modality to calm and re-ground myself and connect with my heart again. I also used Reiki on my kiddo when he was really fussy and he's always been super sensitive. So it was something that I was able to calm his nerves. And now both of my kids ask for Reiki when they're sick, when they're overworked from school, they're asking for Reiki. My husband too. So, so it's just been as I've seen these little pieces fall into place, like, this is real and it feels good. I'm seeking out more and more, and it's become this cycle. And I love teaching other parents these pieces of self-care, helping us to connect. If we're so into our minds, we cannot hear what's going on in our hearts. If we're so nervous and we're washing the dishes, that's a moment for self-care. You can be thinking like, you could be listening to music. As I started to see the progress that I connected deeper with my heart with as I continued on, I could see the more that I practiced and the more self care that I did for myself, the more times I would meditate in the morning, my mama time, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever I could get in because we're busy moms. Even washing dishes, having those moments of calmness, listening to a nice podcast like Tanya's podcast, those self care moments really helped me to connect with my heart better. So I talk a lot about self care. I talk a lot about being a change maker, having the courage to not live in the changes that we need to see. So, not living in the current state. If it's not working for us, having the courage to make a change. And that's a huge piece of listening to our heart, is knowing which changes we are needing to make and when to make them and when to find that courage. And sometimes we need a supportive system. Like my mom's a great supporter for me, having that support to help us tune in, hear our hearts, and make those changes.
This is so good and just such a reminder of connecting with our heart and listening. I feel like we're so busy nowadays and just
Mhm.
bombarded by so much information, and we value so much the doing that we
Yes.
forget to connect. We are so much more connected to, and we value much more connecting with our minds and with our brain
Yeah.
than we do with the thinking, think,
Hmm.
versus, wait, what am I feeling right now? What is my heart asking for? You've mentioned the intuitive reading coach.
Hmm.
Talk to us a little bit about what that looks like and how you got into that world. Like,
Sure.
how does she coach you? Like, what kind of, you mentioned the
Yeah.
modality of Reiki. Does she use any other modalities? What other things have you learned,
Hmm.
through
Yeah.
that
Things
intuition?
that help me. Yeah, definitely. It was a very short period of time that I actually needed it. So it was great. And there's so many intuitive coaches around. It's amazing. And there's so many different modalities that we can use now. Reiki was one that I help use to ground myself, connect. Meditation is an amazing one. Recently, I started going to a group Qigong class, which is similar to Tai Chi, only you're not so focused on having the exact placement and movements, but you're focusing on your breath work and energy work. And that's a really great way to recharge and be able to hear our hearts. So as I was working and teaching myself, I've done a lot of self-learning on intuition. There's like Sonia Choquette is a great intuition mentor and has amazing books out there. That's a great way
I
to teach yourself. You like
I love her, and I
She's
use
great.
her, like, her oracle cards every
Yeah.
morning. She is really good. But continue.
Yeah. I love that you're doing them daily too. So I started to use Oracle cards and it was a great practice to do it once a day. And that can be a great way to guide yourself. And also, I have on my Instagram a couple of tips about how to do intuitive writing. I don't know if you've heard about that, but I meditate and then it's like a journaling process that you can build up on to hearing your heart. And a lot of these pieces, you can't do if you're not doing your self care, right? So if you're still in your mind, you're not going to be able to do your intuitive writing. If you need to dance it out, get some movement in, that can help me to connect better when I meditate. All of these pieces are pieces that I have learned and I work through. So when we're not able to calm our minds, we're not able to see the signs that can be around us, right? So sometimes when we're needing to make a change, there can be many signs coming to us. Sometimes I'll see a sign 3 times and I'm like, okay, this needs to happen now. My kids need to change their school in the middle of the school year. We got signs 3 times. And it was people just talking to me about how resilient kids are. I'm like, oh, that's another random moment. Those are not connected pieces in time, but they're saying the same word 3 different times in my life as I'm going, is this what I need to do right now? But if I'm in my mind and I'm focused on, oh, I need to pay these bills, I need to do, your focus on these human things that we have to do, there are moments where we can turn down the monkey mind, I call it with my kiddos. Then we can hear these pieces, we can see these patterns that are coming up in the time where we need to have our courage and make the change.
I love this. Let's go deeper with intuition. I find it a fascinating subject because it's so underestimated, or not, it's not exercised or valued as much as, like I was saying before, the logic, left brain,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
doing. Tell us a story or two of how you followed your intuition, because
Yeah.
you felt the sign, you saw the
Yeah.
sign, you listened
Yeah.
to the sign, and
Oh, yeah.
how does that work for you with your intuition?
Yeah. And it's not cut and piece. I mean, everybody, it's different. So, one example of something that happened to me this fall was I went into my kids' school and their old school that they were at. It was very traditional. And I saw this, I went in and I felt very almost suffocated inside. Like, this is not right. This doesn't feel good. And I went up to my son and he said, Mom, I have to do 3 worksheets today. I don't want to be here. And I thought, there was this charter in my charter school that I had thought of in my heart, but we wanted to try something in our neighborhood. So I said to the universe, like, what am I supposed to do right now? What do I need to do? And then I went on my phone and I was looking at a local Facebook group and someone said, hey, there's a bunch of openings or there's several openings at this charter school this year. And normally we never have openings. We usually have a huge wait list, but we have openings right now this year. And I was like, what? In the same day? I just asked for help. So I called them And I said, hey, do you have openings? I have both a second grader and a kindergartner. Is there any possibility you have openings for two? And they were like, oh yeah, we do. We have one opening for second grade. Do you want to come in and check it out? And I was like, okay, I'll go in, I'll check it out. But it was, your fear, your mind gets in there a little bit and you're like, well, this is a lot. If I change them, my son has friends. He's in second grade. We have a community, but well, I don't know what to do. And my husband and I, we went back and forth for many times. So we said, let's just shelve it for a little while. Let's watch for signs. And then I went into my son's class again and he grabbed me and he said, Mom, take me to the other school. I don't want to be here. I can't be here. My heart's not here. And I was like, wow, he really, okay, there's sign number one. There's sign number two. And then I kept hearing from people. I would say, I'm thinking about changing my kid's school. And I heard, your kids are resilient. They're going to be okay wherever they go. I had 3 different people tell me that within the course of a week, totally different settings, totally unrelated people. And then I called the school back. At that point, my husband and I said, we need to make the change. Oh my God, is the opening still there? So we called them right away and they got us in and we started a month later for our kids. And my son, he came home after the first week and he said, Mom, I used to hate school. I never knew that I could like school before. And I said, buddy, this is part of following our hearts. Like this is calming our minds, hearing our hearts, watching for the signs, and then having the courage to be the change maker, to change and not stick in the situation that's the easiest.
That is fabulous. I love hearing these stories. We're going to
Yeah.
take a quick pause. And before our pause, I invite you, if you're enjoying this conversation, there's 2 other episodes that you'll love hearing. One's Mel Finlander, episode 79, which is redefining motherhood beyond biology. And then Lauren Kester is episode 77, which is trusting your intuition. And it's so in alignment with you, Carrie. I have to connect you with these ladies, but let's take a quick pause and we'll come right back to this. Hi there, I have something really cool for you. I want to give you free access to my signature course called Manifesting Abundance, which typically sells for $997. You can check out all the details in the show notes. All you have to do to gain access is leave me a review on Apple Podcast, take a snapshot of it, and send it to help.thecouragetobe@gmail.com, and we'll get you set up with access to the course. You can also find other free goodies in the show notes. Go check them out. Okay, so you were telling us the story about listening to your heart, connecting with your intuition, having the courage to take inspired action when you're being called with this. And that's great when we're on our own, and it's for your own purposes. But you've mentioned here there were more people involved. There's your husband, there's your kids.
Yeah.
What do you do if your intuition is saying something, but your husband or kids might not be in alignment with that? Has that happened to you before, Carrie? Or maybe you have a different story with that?
Yes,
Or
it
that they have their
has.
own intuition and you're like, no, I don't want to follow it. I don't trust your intuition, but they're
Yeah.
trusting their own intuition. You have any
Yeah.
stories of that sort?
Oh my goodness. It definitely does have cycles in our house. I mean, my husband is a science-minded person. So there definitely are pieces where I'm like, oh my God, we need to do this right now. And he's like, no, it doesn't need to happen right now. Let's give us some time. Let's look for so I love that he gives me a little bit of a grounding piece, because if it was me, I'd just be walking around following right. I would need a little bit of grounding. So he does bring that to me a little bit, which is amazing. When we moved to our house, it's actually a pretty interesting story. We live in an area that is really populated with families, and it's very, very hard to find a house. And my husband, we knew we wanted to move here. His job is close by, the schools are better, and we were projected to come here, but we could not find a house. And I had a dream and I saw a house and I looked it up. I was like, I think I know which house this is. I looked it up, I figured out the address, and then I told my husband, please go knock on the door. And he was like, no, I am not going to knock on the door. Like, this house is not listed for sale. It's been original owners for like 30 years. Like, what? We can't knock on the door. So I said, what's the harm? What's the worst that could happen? On your way home from work today, I need you to knock on the door and then call me back, right? So he says, okay, fine, Carrie, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this once. And, when it doesn't work, because that's where his mind was, when it doesn't work, I'm just probably going to say, I told you so, which I knew was coming. So I'm sitting on pins and needles waiting. He went and knocked on the door. I didn't hear back from 40 minutes. And I was calling him like, what is going on? And he said, well, they had me inside and they told me, yeah, let's set up a time for you to come check out our house. And that's the house I'm sitting in now. So the knocking on the door, the following your heart. Sometimes my husband now, he's like, well, I will knock on the door. What's the worst that can happen? I guess I can say I told you so, but he doesn't say I told you so. He's definitely a believer now. I've been working with him to learn the intuitive writing. I've been working with him to use his intuition at work and to feel that energy, to see those patterns. And it's been amazing. People love that story.
That is awesome. I love it. And what a better metaphor than knock, like this is literal, but that you can carry with you. Like just knock on the door. You never know. That's like take action. You never know what might happen from it. That is wonderful, Carrie. Thank you for that
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have people like your husband, that's maybe more left brain that didn't
Sure.
really believe in this. Maybe he didn't grow up with as much, of the
Mm-hmm.
spiritual
Yeah.
side or the permission to connect with our intuition and our heart. What would be, some tips or some thoughts that you might have for people that are like, oh, I don't listen, like I don't have intuition, or I'm not connected with my
Sure.
intuition, or,
Sure.
it's better to think things out or be
Mm-hmm.
logical. What kind of tips do you have for people that might be more on that side
Yeah.
of the road?
Yeah. And I've learned over time that the more education we receive and the more we're learning evidence-based practices and all of these different things, if we're working on our PhDs, my husband's very educated, he has his PhD, the more we can get into our monkey minds, right? The more layers of knowledge we've put on us, the less sometimes we can hear our hearts. So, one thing I've noticed is my children are very connected. They love talking about how they can hear their intuition, how my son loves to talk. I manifested that, mom. I manifested this. I'm like, well, you're really excited about manifesting, but I don't always know if it happens in 30 seconds. Maybe it does. I'm not going to say, no, that wasn't. I'm just going to go with it, dude. So, children definitely have this, they have less layers in their onion of not believing, right? And some adults really have been raised with more layers, baby. So I always encourage people to try it. I'm like, what's the harm that can happen? Let's get our toes wet. Let's just start. Let's ask for something. One piece that I love to do with friends is let's just start with changing our mindset. Let's just switch from, oh, I don't really want such and such thing to happen, to let's switch it to, what do we want to see happening? With my son, it was like, I don't want to camp over here by myself because there's no room left to camp by my friends. And I said, let's switch our brain from, I don't want to be over here by myself to, I really want this one friend to come and camp near me. I haven't seen him yet. And guess what? 30 seconds later, that kid walked up. I do not know how that happened at that time, but he is definitely a believer. Mom, this can happen. I can change my mindset and it gets that energy. It flows and it doesn't get stagnant. So, tips that I have are starting small for some people. You don't have to jump in with Sonia Choquette's book and read and try all the practices. You can just try switching our mindsets and looking at the positive pieces in life. I feel like that is getting our energy flowing. It's getting out of our minds and into our hearts.
That's fabulous. Thank you for that one. I see, that people that might be starting out might be like, oh my God, I don't believe, I'm skeptical, How do we allow space for intuition to get those intuitive hits? How do we create? You mentioned a little bit of journaling, you
Mm-hmm.
mentioned Reiki. What are some practices that we can start putting in place so that we can start receiving the downloads, the messages, the heart connection as we're going about with our day?
Yeah. So definitely, if you can try to get meditation is a great entry level. It's calming your mind down, listening to your heart. I often hear messages a lot when I'm meditating. That's when I can hear what I'm lacking in my life, maybe what's making me sad in a moment. what inner child pieces have come up. That's when I hear it is meditating, when I can calm myself, trying to find that practice, that self-care that's going to help you to turn off the mind, to hear the heart. That's one. Reiki was another one that was really great for me. It helped me to heal pieces. If I'm having a lot of feelings and emotions, then I'm not able to connect. Movement is a great one. So sometimes if I'm really, really nervous about something and I can't hear what's the next step, or I'm stuck. Do we change schools? Do we not change schools? What do we do? I just want to hear my heart, but I'm so in my mind and so nervous about it. I can't hear it. Movement is great. Pilates and dancing and singing is a great way to really just open up everything for ourselves. When I do Reiki, I love to do working on my chakras, and you can study about chakras. So I do some meditative pieces with aligning my chakras, Qigong, they touch on chakras sometimes. I guess actually it's not chakras, but they do a little bit of work with centering ourselves, grounding ourselves, releasing other people's energies, feeling our own energy, being in our own space. And that's a huge piece for me too, because I'm an empath. So I'm definitely taking on my kids' energy, the environment's energy, just going into a library, I'm picking up other people's energy. And that's something I've had to work with for both of my two kids who are also empaths and come home from school just bursting sometimes. So the energy piece, if you're an empath, if you're picking up a lot of people's energy, sometimes it's also termed as a highly sensitive person. That's been a huge piece for me. Is this my own energy? Is this somebody else's energy that I'm feeling too?
This is so great. Thank you for that. I want to go deeper because your specialty is with kids,
Yeah.
not only as a mom, but like
Yeah.
what you've seen with, like just cases of what kids have picked up. Let me see which way I want to take this. So kids, like you mentioned before, like maybe a kid is not speaking because he or she is feeling something at home. Do you have some stories of that, of how you've notice something in a kid,
Mhm.
especially if they're very sensitive or
Yeah.
empathic or have some
Yeah.
type of sensory, disorder or whatever it is. If you could share with us some of those stories and how you've helped them reconnect to their heart so that we can do it as parents too.
Yep. So definitely a lot of these kiddos that are coming now, I use the term gifted, spirited, and highly sensitive. Gifted meaning they come in with this knowledge. They come in with a thirst for knowledge and understanding, and maybe knowledge comes easier to them than other kiddos. Spirited meaning they have a zest for life. My son was born, he had these bright blue open eyes. He looked right into my eyes and my world was rocked. My husband said, he's beautiful. He turned his head and looked into my husband's eyes. And my husband was like, whoa, what is going to happen in life? Our life was rocked. So spirited, meaning they're coming in, they have this zest, they have this thirst, and they're coming in loud sometimes. My children are very loud with their thirst for knowledge, their thirst to be heard and not be ignored. And then highly sensitive piece is their sensory systems for my kids. They're very connected. Sometimes they jump from left brain to right brain very quickly. In the right brain where they're very overwhelmed with feelings. They're very overwhelmed with the feeling of socks on their feet. So when I talk about these pieces of coming out of our brain, coming into our heart, it's meeting my child where they're at. It's helping my child through these emotions and helping them. We've used tools such as talking about our monkey minds, hearing our hearts. If we're overstimulated by the feeling of socks on our feet, we talk about, hey, our brain works a little bit different in our family. We all have a different brain here. And so I'm going to live in that moment. I'm okay getting it out. Maybe I have to stomp it out. We use some of the sensory pieces from OTs have helped us. So that way we can live in those moments. And we cannot talk. I cannot analyze what's going on. I can describe it. I notice you're feeling upset because your socks feel funny. I notice you're feeling upset because I'm brushing your hair. So I really am in the zone of living in their feelings with them before I can use the logical left brain to describe what we need to do. Maybe we're in a hurry. I can't tell them right then that we're in a hurry because they're still going to get up there in their monkey minds. So I'm using these little pieces. We have learned in our family that spirituality was something that we really needed to bring into the puzzle. During the pandemic, we didn't have time to go to a spiritual center. So we did a lot of it at home. But once we were able to safely go to a spiritual center, it really was like night and day for my two kids. We found a community of like minded people. We ended up changing their school to something that is social, emotional based and focused. And they have room to breathe in their school. They can be themselves. They can have a meltdown and they don't feel judged. They can have needs of needing to work faster in math. So we're looking at our whole child to see, do they need something different socially? Do they need something different emotionally, more support than the traditional school can give them? So, along this line, it's looking at the spiritual piece, it's looking at social emotional, and it's also teaching the tools of what your monkey mind looks like, what it looks like when you get into the right side. We discuss our brains think differently. We discuss manifesting. I bring that up with my kids, positive mindsets. We're not going to focus on the negative because when they're in that right side of their brain, they're wanting to come up with these negative pieces like, oh, mom, it's your fault that my socks feel funny. I'm like, oh, okay, you can blame me today. That's all right. But we're going to focus on how to get the socks on. And as I've been teaching my son all of these healing pieces, he really has sprouted and blossomed into this organic version of himself that was in there, and his heart wasn't happy. And as we've been teaching all these things, he's so happy. He just beats to his own drum. He says, I love school. Mom, I love changing my mindset to the positive pieces. It's just been night and day. And as I've been sharing these pieces with other people, they're like, oh, wow, I haven't thought of teaching these pieces to my kids. I didn't think about connecting with them heart to heart. I didn't think about throwing the parenting book out the window and finding what we needed for our kiddo, what works best for them, or trying something new. Or I didn't feel like I had the courage to try something different because it's hard to make change. It's not the easiest path.
And to change the patterns, just evolving, especially like traditions and different things,
Yeah.
that might not
Yeah.
fit your kids. Like I'm just thinking to myself, born and raised in Spain, where our lunches are
Mm.
like 3 hours long, sitting at a table. I cannot ask my
Ah,
daughter to sit for 3 hours
right.
straight and talk.
Yes.
Like it's just like, no, that tradition is different. Maybe she'll come into it as she gets older, but I am not asking her, requesting that because
Wow.
it'll drive her nuts. Thank you for
Yes.
sharing that. Let's go, because there's so many different questions that I have within everything that you're
Different pieces.
mentioning, which I think is great that you're teaching them about spirituality and the emotional and social aspect of it, because I think a lot of these things aren't taught at school and aren't valued as much
No.
at school because it's more like follow the books, study math, study science, study, reading, and like
Hmm.
it's these prerequisites of what we think is going to make a whole human and the educational system. That's where I want to go
Ooh,
back to. You were talking before about the school that your kids were at, which by the way, how old are your kids? I didn't even ask you.
sure. I have a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old. So they're going into first grade and third grade next year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're at a great age. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, let's go into the educational system.
Mm.
What are your thoughts on it? What would you do different?
Yeah, it's that's heavy. That's a heavy topic. I used to come home from volunteering at my kids' school when they were at their traditional school, and I would just cry because we moved our family from a nearby community to this community for the schools because we had heard it was such a good school system. And I'm very passionate about meeting the children in all of the areas, right? My daughter went to kindergarten this year, and it was very, very structured. And they were teaching her, you have to have everything perfect. But if you don't do it in enough time, you're going to lose out your special playtime. So she was like, what do I do? And she was getting nervous. And my son and daughter both went through this. My son went through it too when he was in kindergarten, was I have to finish it in time. So I have to rush, but also I have to do it perfect. So it's like, what are you teaching this child to be in their mind? How can they learn if they're not safe in this environment, if they're not feeling secure, if they're not feeling like, wow, I can be myself, I can do my work, I can try hard and learn and grow. So that's why we needed this change. My kids are also very sensitive. So they're feeling all this emotion about a worksheet, whereas other kids might be just going through it and like, well, I did the worksheet, I turned it in, I'm ready for the next thing. My kids were over here analyzing, I can't miss special playtime, but I have to do this right. So I think tuning in and watching your child and seeing, how is my child affected by this? How is my child doing? Is my child's heart okay? And tuning into your child, that's when I say the heart to heart and the connection. Do they look exhausted when they come home from school? Do they need less activities after school? Do they need to be outside riding their bikes, jumping on trampolines, going to the community pool? What is your kid needing? We're over programming our kids, right? Because we're busy parents. It's hard. Being busier is almost like a popularity thing, right? The more busy I am, the more important I am. So there's kind of this piece that you have to look at for yourself and for your family is this the right setting for me? Maybe you can't switch schools, but maybe you could reduce the stress that's placed on their system outside of school. Maybe you could, at our traditional school, they had a lot of computer time. So when we got home, I was like, nope, you're going outside. Sorry. I know the homework's online for kindergarten. You're going outside. Well, I'll talk to your teacher. You're not going to sit at the computer again when you get home from school. So, making these decisions for yourself and understanding like what's best for your family. I know not everybody has this amazing charter school with like a social emotional program. I'm really encouraged that I'm seeing something like this exist, right? It tells us like, maybe there is a piece of education that is on the right path. Maybe we can get there. Maybe we're sharing this knowledge and we're trying to get there. I don't know if it's going to come super fast, but I'm really in hopes that we'll see more of those changes in the schools. Right now, what we can do is what affects us at home.
Yeah, thank you for that. To me, it's just navigating the educational system here, and especially because it's a different country and I didn't grow up in this
Mm-hmm.
type of education, it's different. And
Right.
Spain has its own flaws too. I don't think any place is perfect, like no
No,
school is perfect either. And I
no,
think that's why
no.
it's even more important what you were saying, Carrie, of just connecting with yourself, connecting with your intuition, connecting with your kids' intuition,
Mm-hmm.
and seeing what they're needing. It's so important, because
Yeah.
they are not all cut out the same way. There's different
Yeah.
brains, they think
Yes.
differently, right? Tell us a little bit, where can people find you, Carrie?
Yeah. Yeah. So I have Heart to Heart Parents podcast and people can email me. I'm happy. I love receiving questions and info. Info at hearttoheartlife.com is my email. I'm working on my website, but I'm also on Instagram at Heart to Heart Parents Podcast is my handle on Instagram. And I love to post silly clips. Sometimes I do the Crunchy Mama series where I am a mom trying to be the perfect crunchy mom with Birkenstocks, natural organic food, less toys in the house. But then life happens, and sometimes the child has to eat the Cheez Its. So I love to do spoofs on, we can't be these perfect versions of mom, where sometimes we need to just let go and live and show our kids that we're human. So that's where you can find me.
That's awesome. I love that. That's so important because I remember when I was starting out as a mom, I was like, you
Yeah.
wanted everything to be perfect. It's just, it's society, it's the culture that's,
Mm-hmm.
we put these expectations on ourselves, like breastfeed, don't breastfeed, C-section, no
Mm-hmm.
C-section, do this,
Yes.
do that. And God
Yeah.
forbid you give your child a Cheez-It, it's like, you know what? They will not die from it. I know there's plenty of
Yes.
people our age that grew up on mac and cheese and Cheez-Its, and it's not the end of the world.
We
Like the kids
survived.
they will survive. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
but this came with time. Like now I can laugh at it. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
someone's listening to this
Sure.
that's a new mom and they're like horrified, like, oh my God, how dare you? So I love that you're spoofing that and that you're sharing. I'll have to
Yeah.
go check it out.
Yeah.
One question that I love asking my guest is, what's one thing that our listeners can do to live a life with more courage?
to be that change maker. If you're a parent and you're listening, I love that we have this courage inside of us to make a change when our kids need it. And also, we're raising those change makers. They're watching what we're doing. So let's have our courage. Let's see these changes through for our kids.
Thank you so much, Carrie. This was
Yeah.
wonderful. I appreciate
Thank
you.
you. Thank you so much, Tanya. I really appreciate it.
Hi there. I have something really cool for you. I want to give you free access to my signature course called Manifesting Abundance, which typically sells for $997. You can check out all the details in the show notes, and all you have to do to gain access is leave me a review on Apple Podcasts, take a snapshot of it, and send it to help.thecouragetobee@gmail.com, and we'll get you set up with access to the course.